Well, it is good to be back with you for another day as we are continuing our journey through Advent and using the Jesse tree as a model for that. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the Jesse tree and how you can be involved, you can visit that URL right there at the bottom of your screen, go.christtable.today/Jesse tree. There you'll find information on the Jesse tree. You'll find information about all of the 25 days that we're walking through. And you can also find out information on how you can get your own materials from a little ornament packet, 25 ornaments, one to go with each and every day, and then a printed hardbound copy of the study as well. Now, if you'd like to find out more just about Christ Table, who we are, what we're doing, then you can visit right there, www.christtable.today. We are a ministry for those who are disconnected, disillusioned, done with the church, but we're also a ministry that provides secondary spiritual formation opportunities for those who are connected to the church but still want more. So wherever you are, we're here for you. Sign up for the email list right there. And also, would you please consider making a donation? In fact, whenever you donate regularly to Christ Table, then we send all of these resources and things that we give away every couple of months through the mail directly to you and to your home. So today we are going to remain in Genesis and also remain with the story of the individual who we spoke about yesterday, Abram. Today in Genesis chapter 22 and the first 14 verses there. So let's dig in. Our ornament for today, yesterday it was a tent, but our ornament for today is a ram. And we are going to jump into the story of Abraham and his son, his beloved son of promise, Isaac, and a chance encounter, I might even say a thankful chance encounter with a ram. So here we go. Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. Sometime later, so we've moved along in the story just a bit from where we were yesterday, a lot has happened. Abram was promised a big family, a nation by which all people on the earth would be blessed. And then his wife was beyond childbearing years, and that promise didn't come true for a long time. Promise finally comes, true. Son is born, Isaac. You can imagine he was very popular in his mom and dad's eyes, a child both of their old age, a child of miraculous formation in that they were too old to have children. By that point, she was beyond childbearing years, she thought, except for the miraculous work of God in seemingly impossible situations. And so Isaac was, I don't want to say he was a brat, but the Jewish rabbis and people who have looked at this story a lot have said there is great cause to believe that Isaac knew he was special from an early age, and that changed his interactions and his thinking with his half-brother and everyone around him. Sometimes, those kids, I know we say these things sometimes as parents, I'm just going to kill that kid, which probably isn't something that we should say, but we say it sometimes. And if we don't say it, we certainly think it at times. Now we're not literally thinking probably about actually killing the kid, but it's just an expression for those of you who English is a second language. It's an expression that that signifies that we are just at our threshold of what we are able to endure from difficulty of being a parent. I imagine that Abram was there in multiple times, and though we might use "I'm going to kill that kid" as an expression, for Abram, that's exactly, essentially, what God asks. God tested Abraham's faith. The text frames it in that way, saying, Abraham. And God called, yes. He replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, that one I promised. Yes, Isaac, the one whom you love so much. Go to the land of Moriah. And I want you to, I imagine God kind of pausing. Or maybe God was very direct. Maybe God was very firm. I imagine this coming as a bit of a, I'm going to ask you to do something here. And You may not be immediately on board with this. Go and sacrifice your son as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I'm going to show you. Now, we know this rhythm with God, right? I'm going to ask you to do something insane, Abraham, and I just want to see what you do with that, right? I mean, that was the foundation of yesterday's story. Why don't you just go ahead and start out, and I'm gonna fill in the details as we go, but not for you to worry about. Well, I mean, packing up your tent and your your donkey and your wife and everything you own and traveling to a new location is quite different to travel to a location where God hasn't told you where you're going to end up. It's quite different than traveling to a location where your son's going to be a burnt offering. I'm just not certain that I would have. I think I would have inquired further if I were Abraham. I think I might have had some questions. I like to think that I might have said, yeah, is there opportunity for interaction here, God? Now, perhaps there was, but we're not told that there was. And so we kind of have to take the story at face value from the storyteller in that Abram just obeys. Even though, again, this request is insanity. Setting aside the insanity of sacrificing your child as a burnt offering, it's also insanity because God has promised that through this child a great nation will happen, that all the people of the world will be blessed. Like, this is God saying, forget all of that I promised you. And so, God, this story just, let's just keep going. Abram does it. In fact, he gets up in the next morning, he chops some wood himself, he gathers Isaac, gathers a couple of servants, gets on a donkey, and then just starts heading to what will be Mount Moriah. That will be the mountain that God points out to them, which is the mountain actually that the temple would later sit on, and is the mountain that now today is occupied by the Dome of the Rock, the Western Wailing Wall. This is the mountain. This is the location that God sends Abraham to. So get that in your mind, because there are a lot of connections in this story that will, down the road, continue to be relevant as we get to the future of the fulfillment of the promise. And whenever we get to the place where Jesus arrives, this mountain is central to the story of God and the Bible. And this is one of the first moments where we see it here in the text. So the two of them walk together, and Isaac turns to his dad and says, "Hey, yo, Papa, Father, Dad." Yes, Abraham replied. I think Abraham knows what question's coming, right? Yeah, so Dad, we've got a lot of wood, and we've brought the materials that we need to ignite the wood, but haven't we forgotten something? Isn't there perhaps one important thing to a burnt offering that we have failed to bring along? Abraham's, where's the sheep? Now, Abram's response here, is it one of faith that God will provide the sheep? Or is it one of avoidance where I just don't want to have this conversation anymore? I think Many times these stories are written in bare bones skeleton kind of ways so that we may fill in the blanks to the story in ways which help us understand God better and ourselves better. God will provide it, my son, Abraham answered, and so they both just kept walking along together. They get closer. At that point, Abram says to his servants to stay behind. They'll both go do the offering, Isaac and he, and they'll both return. Is that faith? Is that avoidance? Again, we have to make a judgment call as to what's in Abram's head. If he truly believed and trusted God, it's hard to know what conflict is going on in his head, where his faith comes into conflict with his fatherhood. I think there was tension. I hope there was tension. Doesn't every child on the planet hope that in the moment where their father may be asked by God to kill their child, doesn't everybody hope that there will be some sort of a conflict in their parents' mind between their faith and fatherhood? I would hope as much. So when they arrive at the place where God had told them, Mount Moriah, Abraham built an altar, arranged the wood on it. I sense a little bit of stalling here. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I'm not sure why Isaac allowed that. Perhaps Isaac trusts his father as much as Abraham trusts his father God. Either way, Isaac ends up tied up on top of the wood. Abraham picks up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. And this is crazy, y'all. I mean, can we just say that? Can we just say that there is insanity here? I mean, if I love God, but if God asked me to kill my child, I'm pretty sure I'm going to say no. We can talk a lot about Abraham's faith and his trust in God, and maybe that is exactly what's going on here. And I'm not saying that it's not. Maybe Abraham had a tremendous more faith in God than I do. And I think probably he did. I don't know. Because I also think about those moments where Abraham pushed back with God. You know, where Abraham was willing to fight for the city of Sodom and fight for his nephew Lot and Lot's family. He was able to push back with God and change God's mind. God started out, he's going to kill everyone in the city no matter what, as the story goes. And Abraham pushed back, and what if there's 50? God relents. Okay, well, if there's 50, I won't. And then 40, and then 30, and then 20. And Abraham negotiates God down. And yet we don't see any pushback here. It kind of makes one feel as though Abraham loved Sodom and his nephew more than he loved his own son. I don't necessarily think that that probably is the case, but it's difficult for me to reconcile why Abraham was able to do that for other people, but doesn't seem to have done that here with his son. I think it's okay for us to wrestle with that question. I think it's okay for us to provide potential answers for the reasoning why. Abraham picks up the knife, 10 says, to kill his son as a sacrifice, and at that moment, the angel of the Lord calls to him from heaven and says, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. I think that this is a failure on Abraham's part. I don't think that this is a failure of faith in God. I think that this is a failure of Abraham to live in the reality of a world where you can both have faith in God and your actions can have dire consequences for others because you wield that faith as a weapon. Now, that is super deep and unnecessarily so, perhaps. But Abraham was clearly a person of deep, vibrant, and exceedingly strong faith. I know a lot of people who are like Abraham in that way, who still do great harm to those around them and to the world because their faith is so focused solely on God that they are unwilling to see how their living out of that faith is weaponized by them and harms other people. One of the primary ways that I interact with that every day is on social media. Whenever Christians of great knowledge and great faith in God feel as though it's their responsibility to be the moral police and yell at other Christians to repent for seemingly minor infractions and even biblically minor issues all day long. They're the police. They're the bullies. I think that Abram may have had a little bit of that same issue going on, where he was a person of great faith, but also was a person whose interactions in the world left a wake of harm and trouble behind him, sometimes directly as a result of that great faith. Why didn't he look for a lamb? Why didn't he push back with God? Why didn't he say, find another way? Please. I can't answer any of those questions, but I can say that clearly it was not God's plan for this to happen. And it seems as though, almost in the way that this is written, that God himself, that the angels themselves were surprised that Abram didn't push back, didn't stop, was going to go through with it. The lamb's right over there. I don't know why you didn't see it. Or maybe he actually saw it and just ignored it. Didn't say, hey, wait, God, are you sure can we just like do a little swap here? I mean, Jesus himself in the garden prayed, God, if there's another way, if you could let this cup pass from me. I mean, Jesus is God, and God questions himself essentially in that moment in the garden. If Jesus is able to question God's plan and say, are you certain? Are you sure? You are too. And Abraham should have as well. Here I am, Abraham replies, don't lay a hand on the boy. Are you an idiot, Abraham? Have you lost your mind? What is wrong with you? Keep your hands off of God's child. Don't hurt the kid. I know. I got it. Now I know. You truly fear God. You are the only person insane enough to actually try to go through with this rather than question. You're a person of great faith and low mental stability, perhaps. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. So Abram looks up, sees the ram caught by its horns in a thicket, takes the ram, sacrifices it as a burnt offering in place of his son, and names this location, the Lord will provide. The location where the temple will be built, the location where much of the Gospels interactions take place are in the temple courts and on the Temple Mount, Mount Zechariah, the Lord will provide. It's a sign. It's a symbol. It's a foreshadowing of things to come. That even in those darkest moments, even when it looks as though the sun will die, the Lord will provide some other way. His plan will not be thwarted. That's a big word, right? His plan will not be thwarted by irreligious or well-meaning but a bit misguided religious people. The Lord will provide. It's the story of Advent, the story of Christmas, the arrival of one who is the provision, Jesus, the hope of the world. Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Until tomorrow, happy reading.